They said I wasn't family anymore. But when the judge slammed the gavel, the truth belonged to me. I'm Alex, 28M. The quiet kid who grew up as background noise in a house orbiting my older brother, Daniel. If I brought home an A, Mom said good job and kept stirring soup. If Daniel won a ribbon, neighbors heard about it for weeks. He was the gifted one. I was reliable, which in my family is a polite word for invisible. The exception was Uncle Mark, my mom's brother. Same corduroy jacket, modest house with a big oak, shelves of books that smelled like dust and Sunday afternoons. People called him odd. I called him safe. He never threw money at problems. He brewed coffee and listened. When I juggled 2 jobs and night classes in accounting, he told me, slow is still forward. When I saved for a tiny studio, my parents warned I'd get in over my head. Mark slid me a battered ruler and said, measure twice. If the numbers work, don't ask for applause. Daniel pinballed through ventures my parents funded. A clothing line, a photo studio, crypto, each one a bonfire they tried to put out with more cash. Every meltdown came with the same chorus. Be understanding, he just needs help. I became the dependable background hum. Then winter cracked open. The hospital called heart attack. By the time I got there, the hallway had that soft, terrible quiet that means the story's already over. At the funeral, relatives performed grief while whispering about Mark's things. Daniel shook hands like a candidate. I stood under the oak and felt the house go empty. A week later, a letter from a law office. Reading of the will. Mom scheduled a family strategy at a cafe. Daniel arrived with spreadsheets, already planning to manage the workshops. Mom said we'd divide fairly. Dad tapped the table. No outsiders. I asked, what if Mark had something else in mind? Mom scoffed. Don't be dramatic. I remembered Mark labeling the backs of old photos in careful ink. Make memory readable. I had a bad feeling I was about to learn exactly what he meant. The notary's office smelled like paper and winter coats. The attorney, sharp eyes behind thin frames, asked us to sit. Mom clenched a tissue. Dad sat rigid. Daniel wore that lazy smirk of a man who thinks the ending favors him. Parcel numbers, account names, clauses. Then the sentence that detonated the room. I leave all of my property, assets, and accounts to my nephew, Alex. Silence. Mom's tissue slid to the floor. Dad's jaw worked once, twice. Daniel's smirk drained away. There is also a personal letter to Alex, the attorney added, sliding a sealed envelope with my name in Mark's blocky print. Mom's voice came back thin and sharp. There must be a mistake. Mark would never exclude family. The attorney folded her hands. He did not exclude family. He named a beneficiary. Daniel leaned forward. Was he influenced? She shook her head. He executed this 6 months ago. Competent. Witnessed. Notarized. I didn't open the letter there. I tucked it into my jacket like a warm coal. Outside, Daniel caught my arm. We can fix this, he said, voice friendly on the surface. Split it down the middle. Keep Mom calm. You don't even want the hassle. Translation, you weren't supposed to matter. Hand it over quietly. For the first time in years, I met his eyes and didn't blink. I'm going to read what he wanted, I said, tapping the envelope, and I'm going to honor it. In my studio that night, I broke the seal. Mark's handwriting walked across the page. Steady, patient. Alex, if you're reading this, I am where the loud finally goes quiet. I didn't leave you things because you deserved them more. I left them to the one person who doesn't treat people like things. Keep the oak. Pay attention to the boring details. And when the noise comes, and it will, remember, you're allowed to choose peace over pleasing. The noise didn't knock. Kicked the door. Smiles, guilt, and lawyers. That was how the war began. The following week was a circus of family meetings. First at my parents' house, then at Daniel's condo, then back at Mom's kitchen table where I'd once been scolded for forgetting to set out forks. Each meeting had the same script. You can't handle this. Daniel has experience. Just sign it over and we'll take care of you. Daniel pulled out folders with mock budgets. Look, Alex, maintenance on 3 workshops, the insurance, the taxes, it'll drown you. I'm already managing my ventures. I can fold these in. I wanted to laugh. Fold them in? His last venture was a photography studio that folded in on itself after 6 months, leaving him with debt collectors and my parents begging their savings account for CPR. Mom switched to guilt. Think of us. Your father and I worked so hard. Daniel is the one with a family to support. You're single, you don't need much. There it was. I was single, therefore expendable. No wife, no kids, no right to build something. Dad was quieter, but his silences were weapons. He'd sigh heavily, drum his fingers, say, "You're making things harder than they need to be." That was his code for, obey, don't question. Through all of this, I kept Mark's letter in my jacket. Each time their words pressed on me, I pressed back on the envelope. When the noise comes, and it will, choose peace over pleasing. But peace wasn't on the menu. The first letter from their lawyer arrived 2 weeks later. Cream paper, too much ink. They were contesting the will. The claim that Mark was not of sound mind and unduly influenced by Alex. I nearly choked. Influenced? I'd been lucky if I could influence Mark to add sugar to his coffee. Their lawyer demanded mediation. Mine, yes, I had to hire one, explained the obvious. The will was airtight. Properly witnessed, notarized, dated. But airtight didn't mean painless. It meant expensive, time-consuming, and designed to bleed me until I caved. Meanwhile, Daniel tried a softer tactic. He called one night, voice dipped in honey. "Bro, this isn't worth fighting over. We're family. Let's settle. I'll buy you out. Clean cash, no court." "How much?" I asked, curious. His number was laughable, less than half the value of one workshop, let alone all 3 properties. When I said no, his tone cracked. "Don't be stupid. You'll regret this." The next week, Mom arrived at my apartment uninvited. She held a casserole dish like it was a peace offering. "Sweetheart, you know this isn't you. You're not built for this. Hand it over, and let us handle things." I stared at the dish. Cheese bubbling, crumbs perfect. Smelled like childhood, but tasted like poison. "I can handle it," I said. Her smile curdled. "Then don't expect us to help when you fail." That night, sitting in my tiny apartment with her untouched casserole on the counter, I opened Mark's letter again. My uncle hadn't been naive. He knew this noise would come. He'd armed me for it, even if my hands still shook. The war wasn't over. In fact, it was only just starting to get loud. The mediation was scheduled in a downtown office tower, the kind with marble floors and chairs too stiff to be comfortable. Daniel strutted in wearing a suit that looked borrowed. Mom clutched a folder of evidence. Mark's old prescription bottles, scribbled notes, even a photo of him napping under the oak tree, which they claimed showed he was confused and frail. Their lawyer painted a picture of Mark as an eccentric old man manipulated by me, the dependent nephew. I sat there biting my tongue until my attorney slid forward a file. Mark's medical evaluations from just weeks before the will was signed. Clean bill of health. Sharp mind. Competent. The mediator flipped through the documents, raised an eyebrow and said, "This directly contradicts your claim." Daniel's jaw tightened. Mom's hand shook slightly. For the first time, I saw cracks in their confidence. But they didn't back down. Instead, they doubled down. That night, Daniel sent me a barrage of texts. "You're ruining this family. Mark would be ashamed of you. You'll regret this when you're alone." I nearly replied, but then I remembered Mark's letter. Choose peace over pleasing. So I silenced my phone and let their words vanish into static. Weeks later, an invitation arrived in my inbox. A local community event honoring small businesses. The kind of gathering Mark had always attended with his quiet pride. I decided to go, partly out of respect, partly because I needed a reminder of what this was really about. When I arrived, Daniel was already there. Of course he was, with Mom and Dad flanking him like bodyguards. He was on stage, speaking loudly about continuing Uncle Mark's legacy. He spoke as if he'd already won, as if the businesses were his by birthright. My stomach burned. The lies rolled too easily off his tongue. And then, something in me snapped. When the Q&A opened, I stood. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. I'm Alex, Mark's nephew. And for the record, Uncle Mark left his entire estate to me. He trusted me to protect it, not to exploit it. The room hushed. Daniel's face went pale. Mom muttered, "Sit down." But I didn't. I read a few lines from Mark's letter, words about peace, integrity, and paying attention to the boring details. When I finished, the applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. People nodded, whispered. The narrative had shifted. Daniel wasn't the heir apparent anymore. He was just a man exposed in front of his neighbors. That night, messages trickled in from community members offering support, advice, even partnerships. For the first time since this war began, I felt the tide turning in my favor. But Daniel? He wasn't done. And neither was I. After the community event, Daniel's rage shifted gears. If he couldn't outshine me in public, he'd drag me through the mud. Suddenly, anonymous posts appeared on local forums claiming I'd manipulated Mark, that I'd been mooching off him for years. A Facebook page popped up titled "Save Mark's Legacy" with Daniel's fingerprints all over it. Friends texted me screenshots. "Is this about you?" Stung, but I stayed silent. The more I defended myself online, the more oxygen I'd give his fire. Instead, I leaned on Mark's meticulous records. My attorney filed motions, and one by one, Daniel's claims collapsed under the weight of receipts, bank statements, and video clips of Mark bragging about my help with his work. But behind the legal chessboard, family dinners turned battlefield. Mom refused to speak to me unless it was to say I'd betrayed blood. Dad muttered about ingratitude each time my name came up. The one person who surprised me was my cousin Leah, Daniel's younger sister. Quiet, usually overlooked, she messaged me one night. "I know he's lying. I've seen things. Call me." We met at a cafe outside town. Leah looked nervous, eyes darting like she expected Daniel to burst in. When she finally spoke, the words tumbled out. "Daniel forged some of those documents," she whispered. "The ones about Uncle Mark's state of mind? He doctored them. I saw the originals. He's desperate. He borrowed money from people you don't want to owe. If he doesn't get this inheritance, he's ruined." My chest tightened. It was one thing to suspect, another to hear it confirmed. "Would you testify?" I asked carefully. Her hands trembled around her coffee cup. "I don't want to, but I will. I'm tired of watching him destroy everyone for his ego." With Leah's testimony and the originals she snuck out, my lawyer suddenly had dynamite. The case shifted from defense to offense. We weren't just proving I was the rightful heir. We were exposing Daniel's fraud. At the next court session, when my lawyer unveiled Leah's evidence, Daniel's face drained of color. Mom gasped. Dad muttered something about family loyalty. But the judge's eyes narrowed, and the gavel came down harder than words. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had just tilted. For the first time, Daniel was on the defensive, and I wasn't standing alone anymore. The final hearing felt less like law and more like theater. Reporters had caught wind of the case thanks to the community drama, and now there were cameras waiting outside the courthouse. Daniel swaggered in, but his eyes betrayed panic. Leah sat beside me, pale but resolute. When she took the stand, her voice wavered at first, then strengthened. She described the night she found him altering documents on his laptop, the original pages stuffed in a drawer. She slid those pages across the table for the judge to see. Daniel's lawyer sputtered. "Objection. This is hearsay." The judge cut him off. Overruled. The originals speak for themselves. The atmosphere shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't me on trial for manipulating an old man. It was Daniel exposed for deception. When pressed, he lashed out. "This is ridiculous. My uncle would never have trusted him. He was a failure, a leech." I felt heat rise, but the judge's glare silenced him. "Enough. Sit down." By the end of the day, the contest was dismissed. The will stood. The estate was mine legally and finally. Daniel stormed out, Mom chasing after him, Dad limping behind. Leah squeezed my hand under the table. "It's over," she whispered, but part of me knew family wars don't end with gavels. They end with silence, distance, and scars. Weeks passed. I moved into one of the workshops, setting up Mark's office exactly as he'd left it. Tools neatly lined, ledgers stacked with his precise handwriting. For the first time in months, the air felt light, not suffocating. Leah visited sometimes, helping me sort through paperwork. She confessed she was planning to move away, to start fresh far from Daniel's chaos. I encouraged her. Mark would have wanted you to live freely, not in his shadow. The community welcomed me slowly but surely. A local craftsman offered to mentor me. A cafe owner asked if I'd supply her shelves with small handmade pieces. Each step felt like honoring Mark's legacy, not because I had to, but because I chose to. As for my parents, the silence grew permanent. They never apologized. Maybe they never would. But I'd stopped waiting for their approval. Mark had given me something better: trust, responsibility, and a chance to prove I wasn't the expendable son. One evening, as I locked up the shop, I unfolded Mark's letter again. The words were worn, creased, but they still steadied me. When the noise comes, and it will, choose peace over pleasing. I smiled to myself. The noise had come like a storm. I hadn't pleased anyone, but I'd chosen peace, my own peace, and in the end that was enough.